We polled the Magic community, and these are the 10 most hated commanders of 2023.
I'm Mia, and I like stitch edges on my playmats.
I'm BZ. I hate some of these commanders. We're the Nitpicking Nerds, sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. That means you're going to buy Magic cards like you were going to buy anyways. But we're offering you the once-in-a-lifetime deal. To go to Cool Stuff Inc. and at checkout, use code
NERDS
to save 5% on your order.
5% on your order can also be applied at Dragon Shield, best sleeves in the multiverse.
They have good sleeves.
If you use the code
NERDS
at checkout, 5% money dollars on entire order.
You will receive 5% less money dollars taken out of your wallet. Now, if that's not clear, I don't know how to make it any more clear. We're also sponsored by Moxfield. There's going to be an ad, and we're going to tell you how awesome they are, but not right now. Feel free to guess when we're going to tell you, but it's not right now. And happy birthday to everyone whose birthday is today. This video is very simple. We polled. We've got hundreds of responses. We filtered through them. We took the 10 most hated commanders of 2023. That means commanders that were released this year. So only commanders that came out from, January 1st to now are being counted.
There have been a lot of releases this year, so there are a lot to choose from, but we're going to start with our honorable mentions. What do you want to say on this?
Yeah, this commander didn't get any votes, but I figured people would be pretty annoyed by it. It's Ixal, Scion of Atraxa. Maybe it's because it released in like February or mid-January, like way earlier this year, and people kind of forgot about it, but this is an infect creature. That's got flying, so it's evasive, and it's just going to poison you out on like turn 6 or whatever.
It also steals people's cards too if they have enough poison counters, so I could see how people really wouldn't like playing against this. Granted, it wasn't a pre-con, so maybe more people are used to it or something.
Yeah, wow, you're right. It steals cards and poisons people out. Those are like the two most hated things, but this card got 0 votes. We did Discord, we did YouTube, we did some other things, and it's like nobody remembers Ixal.
Maybe because they see you playing and they go, oh, it's okay.
It's okay.
I'm sure he would never put it on.
It's no problem. What is your honorable mention?
My honorable mention is Slimefoot and Squee. I think that this just has so much value, and it just goes, I'm not going to say infinite, but it can combo pretty easily with a handful of cards, and it's just, we've seen it on $20, we've seen it on higher budget, and it's been just as effective every single time.
Yeah, it's also kind of hard to interact with if they just need like a sapling token in play, and then Slimefoot and Squee does whatever it's going to do from the graveyard, so I could see how that's pretty like salt-inducing. How are you supposed to answer it if they have a sack outlet, right?
It's kind of like Yuriko decks where you have to answer the little weenies first before you actually answer the big threat.
Ooh, that's probably a good comparison, because it's never going to be taxed. It's always pay 4 mana. Even if they got to pay an extra mana once from the command zone, it's still just going to go right back in the graveyard, and then they're going to start paying 4 for it.
It fuels itself, and that's just what makes it pretty salt-inducing, at least for me.
Yeah, all right, let's get to number 10. Now, this is number 10 for multiple reasons. This is the 10th Doctor. 3 blue-red for a 3/5. Whenever you attack, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. Put 3 time counters on it. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend, and has timey-wimey. You can pay 7 and time travel 3 times, which removes time counters from things with suspend, and activate only as a sorcery. There's actually like a lot of reasons that this card made it on this list. Not just because it's 10th at number 10. That actually had nothing to do with it. People are not the biggest fans of the Doctor Who cards. Like, just in general, I got a lot of votes that just said the Doctor Who cards were boring. Whenever someone tries to read a Doctor Who card to me, I fall asleep.
Yeah, I think that Universes Beyond usually does have a little bit of negative bias to it when people associate like those cards with something. However, I think the 10th Doctor is a little bit more overpowered than people thought Suspend would be in general. I mean, no one's playing Joyra or anything for Suspend, so I'm happy they got like more of a support for it, but this is really powerful. It came out with like, what, Rousing Refrain? Was that the one that like kind of just keeps going infinite?
Yeah, Rousing Refrain can go infinite with this, so there's a little bit of like, you kind of maybe have to police this card, and that's not really fun. And also, I did play against this card once. The vibe kind of was like, what are you doing over there? Actually, I don't really care. Let me know when it matters. But it will matter. And like, I feel like you could, like, there's just a lot to keep track of with this card that isn't even in play. So I could understand why people don't like it.
Yeah, this feels like a commander that is either you kill it and they don't play, or vice versa and you don't play, because the person who was playing against it, shout out Kuro, actually had the entire Doctor's board, but I had a card out that said you couldn't play spells with 3 or less, so he wasn't able to play a ton of his spells. But if he was able to play a ton of his spells, then he would just be playing every single spell, and we wouldn't be able to play. I feel like the game would have been over.
Yeah, and if you kill the 10th Doctor once, 7 mana, ooh, at least it triggers when you attack, so it works right away. But kind of a weird card. Doctors were not the most popular, and this is the representation of that. What is number 9 on our list?
Number 9 is Talion, the Kindly Lord. 2 blue black for a 3/4 flyer. When he ETBs, you choose a number between 1 and 10. When an opponent casts a spell with mana value, power, or toughness equal to the number, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. That's a ton of value, but it doesn't really ask you to go in any sort of direction.
Yeah, what does a Talion deck look like? Probably just good blue and black cards. Probably some kind of like, it's a control deck, which kind of means that people are going to have their resources denied, their stuff removed, their spells countered. I like Talion. I think it's a really cool card. I almost feel like I would like it more if it was not a legendary creature, because I really have no idea what this deck is supposed to be.
I've seen it in the Command Zone in CEDH, and I think we've seen it a little bit more in Casual. This does lean a little bit more high-powered because it is mostly Dimir good stuff.
Yeah.
But with his ability choosing between 1 and 10, that number actually does change depending on what you're playing. For instance, in CEDH, we found that 2 is really good, but in normal CEDH, I think Command Zone said 3 was the most popular to like the end-all be-all for numbers.
Normal EDH probably 3, maybe even still 2, sometimes 4. You could like clone Talion and make, choose different numbers and have 2, 3, and 4 locked up. That's basically whenever anyone does anything. That's still going to make them start losing a bunch of life, and you're going to bury them in cards, and then the rest of your deck is probably good stuff. So Talion, kind of the good stuff commander of this year. Number 8 comes out of the Commander Masters Precons. This is Zuladak Voidgorger, 5 and a colorless for a 7/4. Colorless spells you cast from your hand with mana value 7 or greater have Cascade. This is an Eldrazi deck, so for anyone who played Commander this year or just got into it and weren't familiar with the whole cast colorless 10 drops and annihilate you, this was their introduction to that fun house.
I know people usually didn't like Eldrazi, and it was one of the more like stay away from powerhouses of the olden days, and they brought it back, which kind of like reignited everyone's fears of Eldrazi. And this definitely doesn't help, considering you can cascade from one giant titan into an annihilator into another one.
Yeah, you could really just keep going. You could technically cascade Emrakul into Ulamog into Kozilek, so wouldn't that be fun? But yeah, this card is very explosive. It really doesn't do much. It has like no text outside of when I untap with it. If you don't keep my commander off the board forever, you're gonna have a really bad time. So maybe that leads to some like suboptimal play patterns. But that's kind of just the Eldrazi. There's no, if they printed a legendary Eldrazi and I went, that's okay, and it didn't make me feel something, I'd feel a little cheated.
I mean, isn't this just the colorless version of a Timmy deck? Yeah,
it's just colorless, gigantic. Just you wait until I untap, because I'm going to throw Ugins and I don't know, like Maelstrom Colossuses and Meteor Golems at you.
It's just really powerful, and I guess you could build it technically if you wanted to go with artifacts or something. That might be somewhat more interesting, but this is just a powerhouse on the board, but it folds to like 1 or 2 board wipes.
And the other contributor to this, I think, is Not of This World, which is just a free counter spell if you have a 7-power creature. Zuladak is, and you don't want him to die, so you always play that card in your deck. So whenever they try to remove it, someone probably has Not of This World, Cascade, and then they're just like, you gotta be kidding me.
I think this was also partnered with a bunch of the new Eldrazi cards, like Rise of the Eldrazi. It was just packed with so much power, and then just the upgrades were so, I guess, just like linear to this, that it was just, oh no, this is going to be such a strong deck as long as I untap, right?
That's such a good point. Yeah, people were just constantly adding Moxfield.com into this deck, because Moxfield.com is actually a way to build the deck. And once you start building the deck on Moxfield.com, you end up with too many options. It's too easy to optimize and sort your deck. So all the Zuladak players out there were like, I think I need Ulamog Cecil's Hunger. Put it in the deck, and everyone who's ever lost to Zuladak has Moxfield to blame.
Moxfield actually has a Wizards of the Coast account where they'll keep the precons without any updates or anything, just the original printings and original card list, and you can take that, clone it if you want to just upgrade your own precon, and then take out the cards that you already took out, and then just add some new ones in to actually reflect your deck.
After hundreds of shout-outs, this website's starting to sound pretty good. I think you might want to get on there.
Number 7 is Rukarumal Biologist. Wooburg for a 3/3. When she ETBs, choose a creature type. Slivers you control and non-token creatures you control are the chosen type in addition to their other creature types. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. If you pay 3 and tap her, you create a 1/1 sliver creature token. Now, I think the big thing with this card is a lot of people thought that we didn't need another 5-color good stuff Kindred Commander. We had Morphon and stuff. We had like Kenny if you wanted actual just casual 5-color good stuff. And then this is just adding another one to the mix.
I don't like how this card is worded personally. It's really confusing. It's slivers you control and also all of your non-token creatures. And you'd think that like, well, my slivers are non-token creatures, but it basically means that all of your creatures and all of your sliver tokens are whatever type you want. And then she makes a sliver token that'll be whatever type you want. I just like, what we really didn't need is another 5-color sliver commander. Why do they keep printing so many of these? I don't understand. Once you got like 3, I feel like you're good. And like, I really don't think there's any more design space. Can we stop? I'm not interested.
I think there's a lot of other creature types that are underutilized. Spiders, perhaps.
I mean, this is your 5-color spiders commander if you really want it. To me, it doesn't, it's not as interesting as Morphon. And I don't even think Morphon was that cool. I think I want less of this, and I want more hyper-specific stuff. And I'll say, when the Spider Commander comes around, like when an Ishkanah comes around, I'll build that. I won't build a Ruka-Rumal.
I want a 5-color commander to come out every so often, but I do want it to have a specific theme. For instance, if it was like battles themed or something, that would be really cool.
That would be sick.
But with just, choose a creature type, plus this makes tokens, also that type, it's not that interesting.
Next up is number 6, and we're getting into commanders that started to get a lot of votes. This is Sauron the Dark Lord. 3 black, blue, red for a 7/6. It has ward. Sacrifice a legendary artifact or legendary creature. Yeah, good luck with that. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, Amass Orcs 1. Whenever an army you control deals combat damage to a player, the ring tempts you. And whenever the ring tempts you, you can discard your hand to draw 4 cards. This is the epitome of hard to answer good stuff that will just win the game by itself. It even has 7 power, so 3 strikes from this and you're out.
I think that this is just the epitome of, what can't it do? If people didn't have a good idea of Lord of the Rings to begin with, and they were like, I just really hate all those cards, this is not helping with it.
Yeah, this is not helping. You're going to see this and you're going to go, excuse me? I have to sacrifice my commander to kill this or have a really hard time with it? And one of the ways that I would think to get around this would be to make opponents sacrifice creatures. But the Amassing Orcs 1 always puts a stupid little body in the way so that you basically can't kill Sauron with like a Fleshbag Marauder type effect.
I mean, its opponent casts a spell. That is so powerful. It's not even just like a creature spell, or it's just a 1/1 counter on him, It's just making bodies that you can sacrifice for value, especially since it is in Grixis. You could be sacking them to like Razaketh or something and just getting eternal value from those little orcs.
Yeah, sack outlets like, Goblin Bombardment or anything like that are just completely obnoxious with this. It turns every spell they cast into some kind of effect that's just going to mess you up, and you're all this whole time trying to get rid of Sauron. They can just back it up with counter spells and removal and maybe some card draw or ring tempting, which is the same thing in this deck, and then you just can't really interact in a very meaningful way. I'm not a big fan of Sauron.
Yeah, the fact that you can also just dump your hand, go to combat, hit anybody, and then just draw 4 cards, that's just really powerful. I think if it said 1 card, and if the ward was just sacrifice an artifact or a creature, it might not be too bad. But this is just too many protections rolled into one that it makes it just really hard to get off the board.
I love the idea that Sauron is impossible to kill. He's super strong. It's the pinnacle of the Lord of the Rings main villain. But I don't think there needed to be all this text after ward, sacrifice a legendary artifact or legendary creature if you wanted to have that on the card. And I think this card gets undercut in coolness because there's not just 1 Sauron. There's 7, and 6 of them are garbage.
I think the fact is that it had to be legendary because he is the big bad. But having it in your command zone is a little bit too much of an easy access.
Yeah, having the ward sack a legendary creature in command zone is too good.
I mean, it's not just ward, because Saruman of Many Colors has that, or some sort of ward too, and that's not as bad. But it's, card draw if you dump your hand. Making orcs every time somebody casts a spell that isn't you.
I mean, every single ability feeds into the next one. It's just, it's kind of annoying. It's a little bit much. What's number 5?
Number 5 is Thalion the Gitrog monster. 1 white, green, and black for a 4/4. First strike, death touch. You can play an additional land on each of your turns. Creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. When she attacks, sacrifice a creature or a land, then draw a card. This is another portion of just this is so much value.
I think everything on this card. It's additional lands, it draws cards, it ramps, it shuts down your opponents a little bit, it slows them down. Their haste stuff, kind of irrelevant. A lot of different decks are going to want this card dead immediately, even just for the second ability. And there's 2 other value train abilities on it.
I've seen people play this with like Crucible of Worlds and then just spit out a bunch of lands. I think he could do some really nasty stuff with like Strip Mine with this deck too.
Yeah, it doesn't take much to get going and kind of have this deck take over the game. So I could totally see why a lot of people were like, nope, hate this card, hate it. I mean, First Strike Death Touch, it's kind of impossible to block, and it's a really good blocker, so you lose out on some of the like ability to, oh, well, their deck is going to pop off, so we'll just punish them in the early game. Well, Thala comes down like turn 3, and it's got First Strike Death Touch, so you're not attacking past it.
A lot of these cards, too, on this list, this one included, is just a lot of you do this and I get some value or you get hurt by it, and I think that also plays into it. No one likes their creatures and non-basics coming in tapped, especially since we are in Commander and a lot of people play multiple colors of decks, and there's a lot of non-basics.
Plus, this is a green lands matter deck, so you know you're going to be seeing the best land in the entire format, Field of the Dead. And if I had to play against Field of the Dead and my opponents were just making free zombies, I might concede too. Like, that's how do you beat that card?
Think about double Field of the Dead with Vesuva too,
or somehow triple Field of the Dead with that new
the cave thingy,
the clone with one of them's in your graveyard, then you bring it back out, and then you have 3 Field of the Deads. Moving on up to number 4, it's a card that Mia once introduced as Tom Bombaldi. It's Tom Bombadil. Wooburg for 4/4. As long as there are 4 or more lore counters among sagas you control, he's got hexproof and indestructible. Good luck answering that. Whenever the final chapter of an ability of a saga you control resolves, reveal cards until you hit a saga, put it into play in the rest of the bottom, and the ability triggers only once each turn. I was surprised. So much Tom Bombadil hate. Like, a lot of Tom Bombadil hate.
Yeah, Tommy B actually got so much hate, but I think one of the reasons is because of the hexproof and indestructible, and another one is because there's not that many good sagas, so a lot of the decks end up looking the same.
Yeah, you're going to get samey sagas, you're going to get an unkillable. Forget Ward, you can't even target this thing as long as there's a saga out or 2 sagas out. So Tom just ends up being kind of like a rainbow, payoff. At least it's a commander that we haven't seen before, like Wooburg Sagas. That's pretty cool. I would not have guessed that Tom Bombadil was so hated.
I wouldn't have guessed that either, and the fact that it did get support in Doctor Who with like Barbara Wright and stuff. I wasn't expecting more saga, I guess, support.
Yeah, Ian Chesterton was maybe also another one, but Doctor Who cards, again, were very similar to the Transformers cards, where everyone was like, oh my god, there's 30 of them. I'm not going to read a single one of them.
Yeah, people just didn't pay attention. Only instead of 30, there was 270?
Yeah, like 270 of them. So Tom Bombadil, big hate for this man.
Moving up to the top 3. At number 3 is Elish Norn, Mother of Machines. Mommy, 4 white for a 4/7 vigilant. If a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, it triggers an additional time. Permanents ETBing doesn't cause abilities of permanents your opponents control to trigger. So you get to play the game double, they don't get to play at all.
Yeah, it's not that they don't get to play the whole game. They get to play some of it. They just don't get to play the creatures have immediate value part of it. This card shuts off Field of the Dead. So I hate it. How could it possibly be fun? This card was over-hated at the beginning, and now I think it's appropriately hated, where people are like, Elish Norn, like, I don't like that card. It's not like, oh my god, that card needs to be banned, but it is a pretty noticeable impact on the game, and it's going to be like a must kill in a lot of situations, because your deck's not going to get to do as many of the cool fun things, and their deck's going to go completely ham sandwich.
I mean, Elish Norn was the big bad of Magic, so it did need a giant ability, but people don't like having their decks turned off, obviously.
They don't.
So of course it's really high on this list.
Yeah, actually all 3 of our top commanders released kind of back to back. Elish Norn is just a monster. It really demands an answer in a lot of situations, and it kind of like can dominate the game by itself. It can definitely feel like that. And it's got a little bit of the like Iona flavor to it, where some decks actually cannot play in a meaningful way against this card at all.
Yeah, my Arc deck would not have a good time. I think also because it's a 4/7 with Vigi, you can just chip in with damage, and it's the perfect blocker against most creatures. So that makes it a little bit rougher in the combat metas too.
All right, number 2, the second most hated commander of the year, Atraxa Grand Unifier. 3 green, blue, black, white, 7/7 flying, vigilance, death touch, lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each card type, you can put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand, and the rest go on the bottom. All this does is attack for 7 with lifelink, vigilance, and draw like 6 cards when it enters the battlefield. This is like Niv Mizzet Reborn minus all of the building around you have to do.
BZ said that Talion was the value commander of this year, but
I lied.
no, it's Atraxa. These decks look very similar to one another. There's going to be a lot of blink shenanigans. They're going to have so much card advantage, and they're going to have a bunch of different types in their library, and they're going to be able to spit them out immediately.
Yeah, I mean, and also Atraxa encourages you to play cheaper cards, because if I almost tap out for it and I got like 2 or 3 lands, I want to play as many cards as I can. So I want 0 drops and I want 1 drops, and that pushes the competitive level higher, because now you got like Wild Growth, Utopia Sprawl, Exploration, and then maybe some like, maybe you want to put Mana Crypt in this deck or whatever. It makes sense. All the 1-drop removal spells, sometimes free counter spells, and you know that, the only thing you can really build around with this is the blink theme. And that just means that you as the opponent get to look forward to a game full of Peregrine Drake triggers and Palancrons and tutors for those cards. And look, honestly, if they're flickering Peregrine Drake in this deck, you should just concede. That's not a game I want to be a part of, honestly.
We've played against this a couple times, and every single time it's in like a 10-minute turn gathering cards. It's okay, let me check the top 10 again. It's like worse version of finishing a dungeon.
Yeah, and there's not really a way to do it quickly either. If you want to trigger Atraxa 3 times, that's the way that you're going to, advance to winning the game, but there's no fast way to do that. You have to go, all right, guys, the fastest you could possibly go is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, instant, sorcery, land. Okay, here's a battle. It's free enchantment. That's the only one. Let me just double check. Yep. Oh, this is a planeswalker. Okay, grist. Okay, that's a creature and a planeswalker. Which one do I want to pick? And, all right, guys, I'll do these 7. It's like I felt like I was taking too long even explaining that.
Yeah, I'm just like on my phone, like, you done?
You done? Just let me know.
I think it's also because 3 hits and you're out for commander damage too. 7/7, that's like the convenient amount.
That really is a lot of 7-power commanders on this list, but we got to get to the number 1, the most hated commander by a country mile. Not even close. Mio, what is it?
Atali Primal Conqueror, who is also a 7/7, 5 red with trample. When it ETBs, each player exiles the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. You can cast any number of spells from among those without paying their mana cost. If you pay 9 and either a green or Phyrexian mana, you transform it, but only as a sorcery. And it has trample, indestructible. It's 11/11, and when it deals combat damage to a player, they get that many poison counters. So many words, but it's so brutal considering you just flicker this thing, you steal cards from everybody multiple times, and then you just win because you just keep making clones or flickering or whatever, really.
I'm a big advocate of this card in the 99. I think this card's great. It's super cool. It's like, it is exactly the type of card that didn't need to be legendary. Or if you wanted to make it legendary, could you tone it back a little bit? Oh my god. This thing is a 7-mana 7/7 trample that can turn into a Blightsteel Colossus. If somebody is vulnerable or you find a Board Wipe or a Blasphemous Act or something, you just kill somebody. But it draws and casts 4 cards guaranteed when it enters the battlefield. And it's not when it enters the battlefield if you cast it. That would be much less annoying. It enters the battlefield. So this entire deck is Heat Shimmer and Helm of the Host and Conjurer's Closet and all of these things that are just going to be re-triggering it. So when Atali triggers, there's a, let's say, 10% chance that it's just going to trigger again because you flip your own cards too for it, and it's just obnoxious. You could really kind of, every Atali deck I've seen is just ramp. It's ramp and additional triggers. That to me is like extremely frustrating to play against because it's so time consuming. It's so obviously sick mega value town. I'm just bored by this card. They pushed it too hard as a commander.
It's definitely cool in the 99, but with the other Atali, which I do like, you have to work for it a little bit. It's not flipping a ton until you get to that non-land. You have to give it haste because it's on attack triggers. This one is just like, okay, flicker it, or maybe give it Blade of Selves and Mirror Box so the legend rule doesn't apply. Have a billion things come in, and then you just play everyone's spells while they sit there, just like Atraxa, and you're just like, okay, do you win yet?
Yeah, honestly, they took the original Atali and the original Atraxa, and they removed like the most important part of those cards, which is tension.
And the limiting?
Yeah, the tension and the limiting. Like Atraxa, it proliferates your stuff. But if you don't have anything to proliferate, it's not going to be an immediate thing. Or it's a slow burn. It's going to slowly, gradually build up, and you can't let Atraxa stay out. This one's like, if you hit the board, you lose because I just drew 7 cards. And this Atali, the original one, it doesn't do anything when it enters. When it attacks, it has the trigger. And it's not a guaranteed hit. It's not the I need my value now. It's let's see what everybody flips. I might get lucky. I might not. This is just the worst, watered down version of that. It's just like,
it's easy mode.
10 times better. I can't really. There's nothing impressive about it. It's just like, oh, they printed this card. Oh, you're playing it. And look, I got no hate for anyone playing any of these commanders, but if you are playing Atali Primal Conqueror and you start out with turn 1 Soul Ring, nothing will make me roll my eyes harder. I actually might consider, like, I'd want to see your turn 2, but I would consider conceding.
There was a game where we did play against that deck, and it was turn 1 Soul Ring Arcane Signet.
Turn 2 Kodama's Reach.
And then he went...
Turn 3 Atali, and I was like, literally, I'm not joking. I'm not trying to be a salty dog. I want to concede right now. If everybody else will concede, we can just go to the next game, because I know, like, for a fact, I can see my hand. I know I'm dead.
It's a lot of value, honestly. And in the 99, it's not bad. And I think it falls into that weird kind of niche where I'm happy it's legendary because you can't clone it as easily, but I'm not happy it's legendary because it's in the command zone now.
Right, but it also just doesn't need to be legendary for you to get the stupid ETB triggers. Atali, you've successfully, extracted our salt, and you've harvested it, and what a great harvest it was. If you want to see actually what we think are the 7 most hated commanders in the entire format, that video is here for you right now, and you can click on it and you'll just be off watching another Nitpicking Nerds video. Mia, what's the tip of the day?
Resleeve your decks if you need to.